the secretary. I know Commissioner Schulten is here, so, but we'll start because we do have quorum. If the commissioners from my left can present themselves.
Good afternoon, Ron Castorina, Richmond County Republican.
Mike Lorentino, Bronx County Republican.
Frederick Humane, Manhattan Republican.
John Plateau, Kings County Democrat.
Jose Roger, please, Democrat.
The staff.
Dawn Sandell, Deputy Executive Director.
Pamela Perkins, Administrative Manager.
Georgia Gutamanis, Operations Manager.
Nina M. Crispino, Director of Personnel.
Kenneth Mulder, Council of the Commissioners. Stephen Dangsberg, Council of the Commissioners.
Has all the commissioners had a chance to review the minutes from July 29th, July 30th, and August 4th?
Yep.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Commissioner Schulten has joined the meeting.
Alan Schulten, Manhattan Dem.
Have you had a chance to review the minutes?
Yeah, I read it on.
Do you have any opposition to introducing them, adopting them?
No.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? They've been moved. Mr. Ryan is here. Good timing.
Thank you. Michael Ryan, Executive Director. Yes, as we have concluded our busier season with respect to the elections process, today's agenda is a little bit lighter than normal. In any event, I attended the National ES&S National Advisory Board committee meeting on Wednesday, August the 5th through Friday, actually left Friday morning, August the 8th. The meeting, basically it's an all-day working conference, so it's 2 days of travel for 1 day of meeting. But in any event, it allows an opportunity for election administrators throughout the country to come together and discuss issues associated with the processing of elections and the machines themselves, the election system in general, as well as to come together to discuss not only problems that we're experiencing presently, but what potential long-term solutions may be. In any event, in keeping with prior commissioner instruction, and to make sure that we maintain this process in accordance with the COIB rules, the travel and the lodging were no more than necessary to accomplish the business of the city of New York. And basically, we had, as I said, on Thursday, August the 6th, we had an all-day meeting. We had discussions. A good chunk of the discussion was to get some ideas from the various jurisdictions about long-term financing and acquisition. There was ideas discussed without specificity and clearly not in violation of any procurement rules, but just to get an idea about whether jurisdictions would prefer over the course of time to be able to tap into some capital financing from the vendor, or whether or not as systems age out, and clearly New York City is not in that position presently, but some other jurisdictions are using older versions of the DS200s, and there was discussions with respect to whether leasing equipment might be more of an option, or whether or not long-term capital financing would be more of an option. And you know, it seemed to me that the various jurisdictions are all thinking about the same things that New York City is eventually going to have to think about at some point. You know, when these machines do age out, they're not going to last as long as the leading machines. Everybody knows that. But again, that's not an issue that is presently facing the city of New York, but it was one that was discussed. The other issue that was discussed was basically on the electronic poll books, but discussions about what the needs of the various jurisdictions would be. And so, apparently there is a movement in some respects away from the development, and it's not just with ES&S, apparently this is a industry-wide kind of a movement away from the development of a dedicated piece of hardware that services only electronic poll books, and to have it be more multifunctional, and that would involve using more of an off-the-shelf product that would be programmed, with software from the vendor. And it kind of went back and forth again for New York until there is a resolution between the both houses of the state legislature that moves more earnestly in that direction. It's a down the road issue, but it's always good to hear, thoughts about what may work down the road. And then within all of that was a conversation more about the long-term strategy of how do we sustain systems, and that got us into some of the things that we've been discussing here, which is, whether or not the training should occur amongst the staff of a jurisdiction, how much crossover there's going to be between staff training with respect to routine maintenance of the machines versus whether the vendor is going to handle all of that. And again, it's kind of a mix and match scenario. I think that fortunately for New York, we seem to be well ahead of a lot of these issues in some respects. One of the things that definitely is a difference for us, and it is a difference for several of the other jurisdictions, when we get compared to places, say like now Florida, that allows for the networking of their voting machines. There are challenges that Florida doesn't have, like what we're facing now with the uploading of the results from the poll sites, because they can do it because they're hardware. But again, not terribly groundbreaking stuff. And then in the afternoon session, basically we discussed how ES&S could help us continue to maintain the system moving forward. And there was a lot of different discussions. I still like the direction that we're going in, which is more towards as much vendor independence as is possible while still maintaining our fallback position of having the vendor be there and having parts at the ready and the like. Unless anyone has any questions, that's pretty much a good synopsis of what happened. And like I said, today is a relatively light agenda. But if anybody has anything else they'd like to add, I'm certainly happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner
How did
Elaine?
I know?
Was there any takeaways having to do with improvements to the system or things that we've identified that might need to be done, and are they in the process of working on those sorts of things for us and for others? I mean, I know that the testing process is quite lengthy, and I'm sure that each of the other jurisdictions has something somewhat comparable to what we have. But every year we seem to come up with a laundry list of potential improvements that would be helpful to be made. And I was just wondering if they addressed anything along those lines that might be specifically relevant to what we might want to implement.
Not so much in this forum. We have regular meetings with ES&S where we discuss what our specific needs are. And since the certification process is different for each jurisdiction, that's not the kind of interplay we typically have at these meetings. The other thing we discussed in terms of more long-term is the possible next generation of the DS200, which, as least the current iteration of it, it does not square with the full face ballot requirement for New York State. The next, and we've had this discussion in at the commissioners meetings as well, but the next generation has at least this one vendor, ES&S, has taken it into the direction of having a combination of a DRE, a direct touchscreen, I should say, and a paper element to that system. The challenge associated with New York is the full face ballot requirement, and having that full face ballot requirement met in a system that then requires you to basically flip electronic pages and go contest by contest. So until that issue is resolved, until that issue is resolved, and I'm not seeing any indication that it will be, but if that issue gets resolved, then we can start to have further conversations. Because of the procurement rules, we strictly adhere to a circumstance or rules, unspoken rules, that we don't really have in-depth, detailed conversations about future products, because then you're running the risk that you're giving inside governmental information to the vendor, which would give them an unfair advantage in a future procurement. So it's a little bit of a tightrope that we walk, not only when we have our private meetings, with our vendor partner now, but also on these larger scale, meetings. So it's the short answer is no. The longer answer is there's a complicated reason why it's not. I think we lost it.
Commissioner Flato?
Yes.
He did it on purpose.
To our executive director again, were there any items, issues that came up in relation to the fact that we're going into a very busy 2016 election cycle? Was there any?
Well, from the vendor perspective, I mean, clearly the issue for us, and this is more of when we meet with them to prep for our elections, our issue with our vendor is going to be moving forward to make sure that the combination of our technical staff and any supplemental technical staff that we would need from ES&S is sufficient to make sure that on election day and in the process leading up to election day, that we have enough technical staff around to take care of any problems, unanticipated problems that may arise. I don't know that there's anything that the vendor necessarily needs to do differently to ensure that, for the example, lines are less or things like that. We do meet on a regular basis with the vendor about our agency-specific issues, and we have conversations that involve our staff, their staff, the executive management, and their executive management to determine that the team that we put in place, that consists of our people and then supplemented by ES&S employees, is sufficient to deal with any problems that may arise. And for example, this is a relatively recent development, happened within the last year. When ES&S techs go out into the field now, they have the same tablets that we have, and they have access to the same information that our staff has access to, so that they're as seamless and as integrated, for the election event as they possibly can.
So, I think at our last meeting, we were talking about training. So we're on track as far as you made a basic point that we need to ensure that we have sufficient staff appropriately trained to carry us to the next your cycle, your sense is that we're on track.
Yes.
In terms of that kind of rollout.
And I received a preliminary email from ES&S with respect to their recent assessment of the training that we've done, and I'm waiting for that. I received that email yesterday, although I wasn't in yesterday. The preliminary assessment is that the staff is further along than would have otherwise been anticipated. And as soon as I get the more detailed and more specific report, I'll certainly be willing to share that. And I just happened to mention that I wasn't in yesterday. And it reminded me, and I'm going to say it publicly, we recently received a FOIL request about my time and leave from a reporter. And I got a printout, and it showed, and I didn't even realize myself, but it showed that I took a week off in July of 2014 and a week off in July of 2015, and I've used a grand total of 2 hours and 15 minutes sick leave in the 2 years I've been here. So I just figured, as long as there are people looking into what I might be doing or might not be doing in terms of time off, we may as well just say it out loud at a public meeting. So.
Could I take, if I could take my observation down one level below, I think we were really talking about our VMTs.
Right, yes.
Voting machine technicians. I'm getting some purely anecdotal information that we may be running short in terms of poll worker recruitment and training. Again, it's purely anecdotal. I'm only hearing from some people as I'm walking around Brooklyn that, you know, they didn't pass the test, or it seems to be much harder now. So other than just a flag, but I think that's an issue we want to stay close to going forward, to make sure that our 5 boroughs, and my understanding in a presidential year, we could have up to 30,000, I think I saw that in one of our articles, 25 to 30,000 temp employees that we're going to need to ramp up to and have well-trained, and that's going into next year.
Right. Poll worker recruitment, since the inception of BS 200s going back to 2010, has been a problem, not only for the city of New York. I will tell you that that was something that did come up anecdotally at the conference. Every jurisdiction is having trouble recruiting poll workers. So this is going to take, and it's not something that's been a secret, it's going to take an all-hands-on-deck approach. We've had numerous conversations, not only with the city council, but also with the current mayor's administration, about different avenues that we can tap into to get more poll workers, people that are willing to work. And you know, it's no secret that the poll worker community, I'll call it, is aging. And we're going to have to find new and creative ways, not just the Board of Elections, but everybody that's concerned with this process. We're going to have to find new and creative ways to attract, you know, folks to the system that haven't been attracted to the system before. And you know, we've had numerous conversations, you know, with the mayor's office. We're looking at, you know, I know that this mayor is currently interested in funding a public you know, relations drive to try to generate poll workers in advance of the 2016 election, in particular because of the fact that it's expected to be particularly busy, and always is traditionally, you know, at least in the recent tradition, has been, you know, 1.2, 1.3 million for a gubernatorial, 2.1, 2.3 million for a presidential, and that's a substantial increase. And the presidential elections are always the most widely attended events. So yes, all of that has been considered, is being considered, and certainly not we in executive management, and I know that the commissioners share this as well, are all open to suggestions and people who are volunteering, who are willing to serve as poll workers. You're not going to get rich being a poll worker, but it is a valuable public service. And so for, you know, for those folks that are willing to do it, we're certainly appreciative of their efforts.
Is the city administration considering an idea like incentivizing city workers to take on that civic assignment at some point? What, are there any basic strategies to get those numbers?
That has been suggested, and it is something I believe that is being reviewed, although I don't work in the administration, so I couldn't say for certain. But clearly, if you take a jurisdiction like Los Angeles, they have at least on paper, I don't know if in practice, but at least on paper, they seem to have a robust, government workers as poll workers process, and they, if you go onto their website, there's a lot of information there available to it. Keep in mind that there are a lot of unions in the city of New York, and it's not simply a decision of the administration to say, hey, we want to do this. It's a complex morass that would have to be navigated in order to make that happen. So I don't see that as being something that is going to be a simple resolution. There are issues of time and leave, how the crediting is going to be done. All of those things have to be taken into consideration, and then you have to get a consensus amongst the unions to agree. And I don't see that happening quickly, although it's certainly something that's been discussed. The other thing that's been discussed, not only with the administration but with the city council as well, is to see if we can get students, either high school students, and/or CUNY college students, to participate in a students as poll workers situation. California does it as young as 16. We could do it under state law as young as 17. But that seems to be an untapped or fairly untapped resource that we could hopefully tap into.
Anyone else?
Yes, I have a brief question. I'm getting a number of inquiries from various voters as to why we moved polling places, and I was wondering if in the future that we could put something in the announcement as to why the polling places have been moved, so that they're aware that we didn't just close polling places arbitrarily and that it was due to a court case. And,
We've been trying to get that message out, as much as we can, and if folks take a look at the voter information notice that goes out annually, clearly the labeling on the outside of the voter information notice is much more striking than it had been in the past in terms of a moved polling place. Now, the fact of the matter is that even though there is a general court case, individual poll site moves occur for different reasons. Could be internal barriers in the building that make it impossible to use the place. It could be external barriers. There's a host of reasons why it could be, and I think that the best that we can do under the circumstances, given the fact that we have 1,241 poll sites and all of this is unfolding as we speak, is to let people know that their poll site has in fact moved on the official written notice. We discuss it over and over again at our public meetings. We meet with the various elected officials. The administration is well acquainted with these issues. I've met with 3 out of the 5 borough presidents so far to try to get them to help us push the information out to the voters so that people know that their poll site has been moved. But given the fact that there is a currently pending litigation, and given the fact that it is possible, and maybe I wouldn't say likely, but certainly possible, that we, since we're not in complete control of everything, that the wrong information could go out about the reasons why something was done. I think the safer course of action is to just tell people that their poll sites have moved. And I don't necessarily know that it serves the public better one way or the other to tell them exactly why.
Just as a point of order for the upcoming meetings, since we've had such a very brief agenda today, we've only been here for about a half hour, and we're just about done, it seems. Is it absolutely necessary that we meet here next week? I just want to poll the commissioners before I make a motion that we perhaps save next week and meet the following week, in light of the fact that it's the end of August and it may be difficult to get a quorum.
I was gonna do that.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
I got a question about the previous.
I will not be here, neither will Commissioner Araujo,
I will not have.
neither will Castorino. So I just need to know who will be here to see if we have quorum for next week, otherwise we will adjourn till after Labor Day.
I can't be.
Yeah, and maybe you want to have a committee. I don't know about Commissioner Michelle or any of the other commissioners.
Do we want to vote on a committee to hold a meeting next week, or just adjourn till after Labor Day?
My motion would be to adjourn till after Labor Day.
To our executive director, are there any issues that they can wait 14 days?
Well, anything that would come up that we're not presently anticipating could be handled by the executive committee and then subject to ratification by the full board. And then if the members of the executive committee are on vacation, then they would appoint someone to serve in their stead while they're away. So I'm not seeing that it would run the operation to a halt by any stretch of the imagination.
It's just that there's, an election coming up on September 10. Maybe if you want to miss one, maybe have, sort of the last week in August. If people are going to be around. I don't know. I'm reviewing that.
Next week is the last week,
So next week is the last.
and then it'll be September 1st.
September 1st.
Am I wrong?
Right, but that's not after Labor Day is actually
Oh,
late.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
well,
so
I
they
missed,
get-
I misspoke. So, I don't, right, adjourn to September 1st, not after Labor Day.
That's exactly what I meant as well.
Right.
Yeah, it happens to be that Labor Day is a little later.
It's a little late this year.
Oh, it is, okay.
Mhm.
So your motion is to adjourn to September 1st.
That's correct.
I second
Next
the
meeting,
motion.
2 weeks from now.
Correct. Unless there's something pressing that we need to address, and I don't see that. It's not apparent from this agenda, and I don't see it coming up. And if there is something, then we can always call an emergency meeting.
I second the motion. All in favor?
Yeah.
Rudino and Remain. Any oppositions? Rudino, you
We'll
remain.
have 6.
We have 5.
I have, all right, I'll vote in favor. You guys don't-
Now,
I don't want to,
go ahead.
it's fine.
And then Commissioner Medina, you had,
Yeah, how much notice do we have to give voters legally for a poll site change?
the answer is, if there's an, and
No, go
Commissioner
ahead,
Medina,
you're fine.
The answer is, if, it depends, on the circumstance, you can relocate a poll site up to and including the day of election day if there's a reason why.
We've had fires
Yeah.
at poll sites on election day, so guess what, we had to move it.
Have notices gone out for primary already?
Well, what happens is, we send out the voter information notice by law, the first week of August. So we try to include all of that information, and we try to get as many of the poll site changes that we absolutely possibly can do up to that point, so that when you're getting it, it says on your voter information notice where your poll site's gonna be. Now, in the past, the voter information notice simply said where your poll site was. Now what we've been doing last year and again this year is if your poll site moves, we've segregated that group out and they get a different voter information notice. The difference is the cover of the voter information says your poll site has changed and it has more prominent language. Last year it was a little less prominent, it had a box, wasn't quite as eye-catching. This year the change notice, the change language is more prominently displayed on the front. The idea being that, first of all, we have very specific parameters that the post office requires us to do with respect to these types of mailings. We don't get to change the logo, and it has to go with a specific template. So there's limits to, changes that we can make, but we're trying to make it as clear as possible that this is not a piece of mail that you should ignore and throw in the garbage.
Are there any changes coming up that we know, like, I know we have this cemetery thing, we need to change poll sites, we need to make changes to some of them, some for the primary. Would it be unusual to change them for the primary coming up now because of that reason?
It would be unusual, although not completely unheard of. I'm not aware of any that are presently pending. I don't know, Ms. Sando, in the
We have
Bronx?
4 or 5 in Manhattan.
There's a few in
Just
Manhattan.
got changed over the course of the last week.
Right. Mr.
So,
Thankful.
yeah, pursuant to the election law 41042, if the Board of Elections, after designating a polling place and after sending written notice of such a polling place to each registered voter, designates an alternative polling place, it must at least 5 days before the next election or date for registration, send by mail a written notice to each registered voter, notifying of the change location.
Right.
So it's
And that-
fine.
And that doesn't apply to emergency situations.
Right, because it also says if such notice is not possible, the Board of Elections must provide for an alternative form of notice to be given to voters at the location of the previous polling
And
place.
under those circumstances, we have had situations where a notice is posted on the old poll site. We've also had situations where there's a notice and a poll worker assigned to the old poll
Door
site.
clerk is
A
at
door
the
clerk
old
is
site.
is assigned there to make sure that the people are diverted to the location that they should be voting at. We make every effort to make sure that the voters are not inconvenienced, but with all of the situations surrounding accessibility, this go around, it's the process becoming more complex, and we have a lot of legal mandates that we have to meet.
Yeah, and it's not only just the accessibility issues. Sometimes we don't control the buildings. Sometimes they do construction, there are lots of things that happen, and we're not in a position to control everything. So unfortunately, changes get made, and we do the best we can in terms of giving notice.
That's true, because last year we had a building or two that were otherwise accessible, but for the temporary scaffolding that was put up around the building to deal with facade work. So there's a myriad of issues why there's built-in flexibility to the statute, but certainly we want to give as much notice as we possibly can.
And in that regard, also 41041 provides for that flexibility.
Right.
But the rule is generally 5 days written notice prior
That's the
before election day?
Yes.
5 days before the
At
next
least
election.
5 days prior to.
At least 5 days.
After the designation?
Right.
Okay, do we have any personnel issues or litigation issues?
Exec does not.
So I move we adjourn until September 1st.
Adjourn to September 1st.
For a second.
Thanks, everyone.